Hydrological developments like the construction of dams and river clearance for navigation are the greatest immediate cause of concern, because concrete infrastructures imply an irreversible loss of lives, human and other species.
Especially the controversial dam in Soyaburi province, the Soyaburi Dam in Laos, because hydrological modification are most often or always incompatible with species assessed as threatened, a number of which are going extinct.
And Dr. Robert Mader will explain the situation around Mekong riparian communities, as well as express his reasoning how IUCN could, at least in theory, be the core researcher for the overall environmental impact assessment.
So basically now China has already operated dams. One of the biggest dams in the world, the Daochang, is already there. And actually Soyaburi is not yet there. And the dams in China already changed the streams of the Mekong River. And that's going to be already a vast impact on the Mekong River. So sort of ASEAN Core, this is what you're suggesting for ASEAN, for at least the Indo-Chinese countries, you know, for this international debate. Do you think MRC can do that? You know,
Not in its present form. I think the whole debate around the Soyaburi Dam has showed the limitations of the MRC. You know, the MRC intention was to bring the countries to a consensus agreement, and they've not been able to do that. And so it's now reached the stage where basically the Lao government is saying, well, we'll go ahead anyway because we have the right to do it. It's within our own borders. And Vietnam and Cambodia are still opposed to it. And the MRC has not been able to negotiate that consensus. So, you know, for the MRC then to take on an even bigger role of negotiating consensus with China, I really don't see that.
Can IUCN perform the task instead? Like be the stage for the voices to be heard? Particularly in the Laotian voices, very local voices.
I think IUCN could play a role. Ultimately, though, I think it needs to go beyond that. One option is, for example, there's a United Nations Convention on non-navigational uses of international watercourses. If another 8 countries ratify that, it'll come into force. So, you know, one option would be for all the ASEAN countries, for example, to ratify this UN convention, and then you would actually have a strong legal basis for managing the international rivers in the region. And it would be interesting if all the ASEAN countries ratified it. Perhaps China would also ratify it, because otherwise they wouldn't be at the same negotiating table. So I think ultimately we need to look to stronger regional or international legal agreements to manage some of these resources. And as part of that, each country needs to be willing to give up some aspect of its national sovereignty to the greater benefit of sharing the regional resource for the benefit of everyone.
I want you to comment on this. Like just recently, the Lao government hired a Poiri consultation company to do an environmental impact assessment on the Mekong River. Yeah, but it turns out that the World Bank then, you know, released a report that Poiri was actually a blacklisted company by World Bank. So what do you think on this? The capacity.
Well, Poiri is actually a big company, like you know, a conglomerate or something. So they have many sub-companies. So the one that was blacklisted by the World Bank, I think, was one of the sub-companies that is not the same as the one that was involved in the study in Laos. So it doesn't mean the whole of their organization was blacklisted by the World Bank. I mean, having said that, though, I think at the end of the day, essentially all that Poiri did with the EIA in Laos is just say that, yes, Laos has fulfilled the requirements that they gave a commitment to do, and this should be considered sufficient. They didn't really generate any new information or any new surveys.
Can IUCN do this task, like to conduct an assessment for the
I mean, in theory we could. In theory we could.
But not in practically.
Well, I don't know. The question is on whose behalf would we do it? I mean, EIAs, ironically, at the end of the day, are usually paid for and done by consultants who are employed by the developer of the project, right? And I think, in a way, this is an essential problem in the system of EIAs as a whole. You know, they're not done by independent bodies. I think in some way, perhaps the way it should be done is that the company should pay, because of course, why should the government pay, or why should an NGO pay for it? So I think the company who's proposing the project, who's proposing to make a profit out of the project, should pay for the study, but they shouldn't directly be involved in contracting the company or whoever does the study, right? Somehow it should be independent. So they provide the money to do it, but it's independent, and the results are the results. Because at the moment, you know, if the company doesn't like the results that the study comes up with, if you go back and look at the contracts that they sign with the consultants who do the study, you know, it'll always say that they have the right to decide what gets released and what doesn't get released. So I think there's a fundamental problem with EIA processes. The second problem is that after EIAs are done, they are then submitted to the government agency that's responsible for reviewing them and approving them. In a country like Laos, you have very little capacity in the government system to do that task. You know, they don't have enough trained people with enough knowledge and understanding to be able to review the EIAs and make an informed decision about whether this is acceptable or not. So there's a lot of issues with the EIAs.
How about Myanmar? With the unexpected reforms in politics and economics, still hidden in a massive hinterland is precious natural resources, which are not yet exploited. But all the economic managements will inevitably encroach the land. Dr. Mather stated that it's now all about the country being selective over foreign investments.
Regarding selectiveness for Myanmar, Mong Yi wetland has been selected by the Honorable Ramsar Convention. Now people are talking about another ecological site in the country to be selected as a Ramsar site, the Inle Lake.
The present context is Burma is opening up its country with political and economic reforms. All the economic activities will be there. For example, the opening up of a very large exclusive economic zones. So those activities are going to impact the environment for sure, biodiversity. So do you think Burma still has time to manage the ecology?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I think we're going to enter a phase of very rapid economic development in Myanmar. And I think, obviously, there is going to be certain trade-offs that with some of that economic development, you're going to get very negative impacts on the environment and biodiversity. Having said that, in a way, Myanmar is in a very unique position, having been left behind for several decades. If they're smart enough to look at the lessons learned from the neighbouring countries and take the good bits and do without the bad bits, you know, I think everybody now will want to invest in Myanmar. So they could actually be very selective about who they allow in. You know, and they could select the companies with the best reputations for taking care of the environment and taking care of local communities and say, okay, we want these companies to come and invest in Myanmar, but we can do without these other ones. So there is a great opportunity in many ways. And I think another advantage that Myanmar has, they have a lot of trained professionals who understand their subject area. Again, they may not have necessarily been exposed to the most recent thinking and the most recent scientific information because, you know, they've been outside a bit. But I think very quickly they'll pick up because they have a very strong scientific and education tradition in Myanmar. I mean, they literally have, you know, tens of thousands of graduates from Rangoon University in zoology, you know. which a country as advanced as Thailand doesn't have. So there are definitely some opportunities for them, but obviously a lot of concern. It could go terribly wrong, or it could be a great move forward.
So not much of the Inle Lake condition attracted the media in these days. What is happening there?
Inle Lake is quite a special place. It's a special place for biodiversity, particularly for fish and for aquatic plants, because there are a lot of species that you find there that you just don't find anywhere else in the world. I think around
another hotspot.
Yeah, it's a smaller hotspot within the bigger hotspot, if you like. So it is quite a special place. It is being, I think, threatened or degraded by a number of factors right now. I think the destruction of the forest on the watershed areas from the streams that are flowing down into the Inle Lake. You can clearly see very heavy sediment coming into the lake. I mean, the lake used to be, or a large part of it is still quite blue, clear water, but you can see this very brown water coming in from the hills where there's no forest left on the hills. That's one thing. There's a massive expansion of floating gardens on the lake, a huge amount of tomato growing, and a certain amount of chemical fertilizer and pesticides being used in that tomato growing, which of course is ending up in the lake ecosystem. So the government is already making efforts to try and address this. Now they've now developed a 5-year plan, 2011 to 2016, for Inle Lake, and they've got support, I believe, from the government of Finland or Norway. Actually, I don't remember. I think possibly Norway, to implement this. So the concern is being recognised, and some action is being planned. So, for example, going back to using more organic fertilizers instead of chemical fertilizers, reforestation programs on the hillside, and so on. We're also hoping, actually, in October to bring a few people from around the Inle Lake area to northern Thailand to look at some of the royal projects and other projects up there, because actually the landscape around Inle is very similar to the landscape in Chiang Rai, and a lot of the problems are the same, and some of the solutions could be similar as well.
Last but not least, an excellent report will be of a waste if it is not really in the hands of those who are the main concern of this report itself, the people and the environmental habitat.
Okay, so yeah, do you think this in-depth research, the Red List report, can be a good incentive for each of the government in the ASEAN member states to actually create some sort of, awareness raising awareness campaign actually among the local people that are dependent on these freshwater biodiversity? Do you think that goes back to the very interesting question that how can you make these technical information digestible up to the government level?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what we need to do, but it is quite a difficult task. But yeah, we have to. Again, most government people will be more interested in economic development and economic indicators. So at the end of the day, we have to show how this underpins or contributes to the economic well-being of the country, and we have to make those economic arguments as well. At the same time, I think we need to, get the information out there into the education system more broadly, and not just in terms of the quite dry numbers and proportions and things, but some of the interesting stories, and of course, realistically, probably visually is a better way to do this for many people than with the written word. So I mean, making films about some of this thing, or television pieces about some of these things, is one important way. We will, in fact, later this year be bringing out an international documentary on Mekong hydropower development. It's scheduled for release in December, actually, but it will be rolled out in in English to a global audience, but also in Lao, Khmer, Thai, and Vietnamese as well, to local audiences. We're making another small, just a short piece, around 10 minutes, on the surveys in Laos that Raphael did. And we're also making another interesting piece on the fish trade between northeast Cambodia, southern Laos, and Thailand, and seeing how the fish trade is going on and what opportunities that provides for improved livelihoods for local fishermen. Because very often the fisherman who's catching the fish is not getting paid very much, but by the time it goes from a small community on the Mekong River somewhere in Cambodia, up to Pak Se in Laos, and then to Ubon, and then to the market in Bangkok, the price has gone up significantly, but the original fisherman is getting very little. So we're looking at some of those trade mechanisms and value-adding things as well.
This has been Towards 2015.
And follow us again every day, same place, same time, same channel. For today, สวัสดีครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ